most ridiculous policy your employer ever enacted or tried to enact? Story 1. At one point, Target tried to change the term feedback to feed forward because it sounded less negative. I almost got sent home that day because I couldn't stop laughing about how stupid it was. Story 2. Best, I had to walk past the customer like you were doing something else, then turn back and ask them an unrelated question before trying to help policy thing. Walked up on 2 fellow employees acting it out and asked if they were practicing picking up girls. Shortly after this, they turned it into just asking them a stupid question like, "Hey customer, what's your favorite flavor of ice cream? Or have you ever ridden a donkey?" And not exaggerating, my GM asked customers if they have ridden a donkey. You should have seen their faces. Story 3. My boss wanted photos of us working to put on our social media pages. Only problem was we were photographers, so on every shoot we now had to take 2 people so one could shoot photos of the other shooting photos. It all stopped when I turned in a photo of my colleague editing a photo of me, taking a photo of him. Story 4. When I worked at Forever 21, we had to show our manager our bags, purses, pockets, etc. when we left to go get food, go to the bathroom, or at the end of our shift. This was supposedly to keep theft down. At the time I worked there, I'd been having pretty severe reactions to perfume, so my doctor gave me a special EpiPen to carry around in case I got sick. I had it in my bag, along with a book and some other junk I brought to work. One day, I was showing my bag to my manager before my lunch break, and she saw the EpiPen. She asked what it was. I told her it was for allergies. She reached into my bag, took my EpiPen, and told me that no needles or drugs were allowed to be used by employees during work hours, as per regulations outlined in the employee code I signed to hire. I was completely dumbfounded, and in my days asked, "You do know what an EpiPen is, right?" She tells me that she doesn't care. I can't be shooting up in the bathroom on my break. She kept saying it was in the rules, blah, blah, blah. I talked to mall security. They came and had a screaming match with her. The next day, we all had to sign a new employee contract that redacted the previous drug policy and the rule about showing her a purse. Story 5. I worked as an assistant manager at a movie theater chain, and my manager told me we couldn't go to school. Yes, because I actually want to sling popcorn till I die. Got out of there. Story 6. I have a buddy who worked for a very large asphalt paving company. His division had approximately 300 employees. Each employee was terminated a week before Christmas and rehired after the new year. They were all forced to take a 2-week vacation and never gained benefits because not one worked a full year. Story 7. IT support, and we were bringing a new company onto our network. Had to replace all their computers, provide on-site training, etc. The brand new project manager ordered 100 orange vests, like the ones you see workers on the side of the road wearing. Only these had the words "I can help" in big, bold black letters. Get a memo from him saying that it's mandatory that everyone on the site wear them. We meet with him and basically say they are ugly and we will look ridiculous wearing them. It will make us look like a bunch of morons. He decided that he was right and we were wrong and went right up to the president of our company and demanded that he reprimand us. President decides to give us a visit to see what is up. The project manager is with him, and we pull out the neon orange and green vests. The president turns around and says they are hideous. I won't allow any of my employees to wear those vests. The project manager lasted 1 week and was replaced by another one of our team. Story 8. The company time clock started rounding to the nearest 15-minute. Unannounced. Only it wasn't nearest. It was next 15-minute in the morning and previous 15-minute in the evenings. If you arrived at 746, it put you down for arriving 8 a.m. If you left at 1714, then it put you down for 1700. When folks noticed that, they confronted the boss and were told it was to average out the time to get suited up and down at the beginning and end of the shift. We pointed out that suit up time is payable. Then the next day, it had quit rounding, unannounced. Story 9. I once had a boss that made everyone write in a journal every single day. You couldn't leave work unless you made an entry into the journal about your day and your feelings. Story 10. My shop tried to make all the apprentices go for extra safety classes after work, or you'd be fired. Problem is that we are already going to 2-3-hour apprentice courses a week through a union that teach us the exact same thing. Enough people complained that the union got involved and forced the employer to 1, make it optional, and 2, pay us to go if we did. I went just for the extra money. Story 11. My boss decided that we should follow Cold Stone Creamery and sing a song every time we got a tip, no matter the denomination. He even made his own jingle up. This was a mom-pop ice cream shop, and I quit a week later. Story 12. The 5-second rule. I was a cook at a greasy spoon diner, and if I dropped the meat on the floor, I'd toss it in the trash like any sanitary person would. The boss saw me do that with a sausage patty one morning and reamed me out for it. He claimed since we mopped the floor every morning and the patty had only been on the linoleum for a few seconds and I was cooking out all the bacteria anyways, It was perfectly safe and a waste of his money to toss it in the trash. Story 13, having to set up their cube with their monitor in the back completely visible, and you're back to the opening aisle. But the overlord who brought forth this great plan had extreme objections to the idea that people with an office like her have to set up the same way. Story 14, overtime is by approval only. You must stay till the job's done, but if you don't get approval for overtime, we won't pay it. Want to guess what happened when I asked for approval? They'll put your request in. Keep working. Story 15, work in a pretty small-time cafe. Pretty much a family business aside from me and the chef and my buddy, and my boss goes on holiday to get married. First day after the person in charge or sister dating my buddy gathers everyone and says if we're not 10 minutes early, we don't get a break throughout our shift. Never stuck. Seems like an attempt to show power. Story 16, a bunch of positions were consolidated. I was one of the few that got to keep my job plus take on the responsibilities of a few others. As a favor, the boss switched us all from hourly to salaried workers and told us we would get paid for 40 hours of work no matter how much or how little we worked, so long as we came into the office every day. The bullshit way of denying us overtime pay, pretty much everyone in the same boat as me just stopped working on Fridays at noon. Within 6 months, we all found other jobs elsewhere. Story 17, worked at a discount clothing store, and my managers all demanded a coworker who was 8 months pregnant cover the fitting room, on her feet, with no place to sit or any water because no drinks allowed on the sales floor, guys. There was definitely more than enough associates there who could have also done it and offered to, but nope, it'd been too long since she had done a fitting room shift, might get rusty at standing in one place, and say have a nice day to people, I guess, policy. She was too afraid to comment back at them because they'd threatened to terminate her after the pregnancy before, but she had been having a couple health concerns and was more concerned about baby, so she wanted the money more. It was tough to watch. Me and a coworker ended up forcing her into a seat anyway, and as we were telling her that we'd take the blame for it and tell them we forced her to sit, a customer walked by and overheard us. This woman was apparently a mother of 4, and when we kind of evasively but honestly answered what was going on, she stormed up to managers and told them they were crooked and slimy for doing that to a scared young pregnant girl. It was pretty awesome to see them all embarrassed like that in front of other customers, and pregnant coworker ended up getting a chair, and after baby was born healthy, managed to get a much nicer job somewhere else. So happy ending. Not nearly as horrifying, but we also had a very, very strictly enforced policy where we had to always say something positive about the customer's purchase every time, even if it was just an old woman buying a pair of plain socks or someone buying lingerie. I was expected to start up some kind of conversation specific to the item of clothing. Managers would come up behind you sometimes and silently observe for like 10 to 20 minutes to see if we were doing it. I got written up a couple times because I absolutely refused to start up stupid conversations if someone was just buying like a pair of panties or something. People already have enough anxiety about checking out. One needs the person ringing them up to start making comments about how cute the bows on their panties are or whatever, and certainly not in front of other customers. Edit to break up wall, text. Story 18, we're not allowed to take more than 2 vacation days in a row. So if you want a week off, you need to do 2 vacation days. 1 personal day, then 2 more vacation days. Story 19, worked for a website. Corporate installed new web filters. Didn't want us wasting time on the internet while at work. They actually blocked our own website. Granted, it was a huge company that owned many, many properties, and we were a very small part of it. But still, there were a couple of days where we literally couldn't get anything done because we couldn't access our own website. Story 20, my previous employer, I worked in a small company, told me that they do not encourage employees to go out during lunch hour because we can always order takeout, and if we want to go out on our lunch break, we have to inform them where we go. Once I went out during my lunch hour to get a quick hair cut 15 minutes, and my boss wife told me that it's unprofessional that I went out for a haircut during my lunch hour. I snapped and told her that whatever I've been doing, it's within that 1-hour break. Even if I wanted myself during that period, I'm certainly not obliged to report to her. Oh yeah, I didn't work long because they're a sketchy couple. Story 21, logging every amount of work you do that takes longer than 15 minutes, so it can be tracked in burned down charts, etc. Scrum, edit, oh god, my inbox. Not reality policy, but when I was in high school, I worked at the shitty local movie theater. Sometimes when the dumpster was full, they would get us to jump on it to try and compress the garbage. It was kind of fun, so we usually went along with it. One day, seemingly randomly, I decided, nah, I don't feel like it. So I told the assistant manager working that day that it was too dangerous, and I refused to do it. He got pissed off and wrote me up. The next shift I worked, the head manager told me if he had been around, he would have sent me home on the spot. So then I decided to call Ministry of Labor, and the next day, the head manager told me I would have never have asked you to jump on the garbage, and I don't think anyone was ever asked to do it again. Well, at least until I was fired, maybe a year later for being late for a shift. Story 22, no moonlighting. Our economy is down, and there weren't any raises this year in my company. So now I run the risk of losing my job if they find out I did some work on my friend's RV. Story 23, on one of my last days at work, I had handed in my 2-week notice. Already my boss put a sign up on a door that said the next employee that slams this door in my presence will be terminated immediately because he was too cheap to fix the hydraulic thing on the top of the door. I didn't say anything, but what a way to tell all your employees they don't matter. If my boss doesn't give about me, why should I care about the job? Story 24, I used to work for a popular UK Italianese chain restaurant. 6 months into working there, our manager went on some corporate conference and came back with this idea that all waiting staff should abandon notebooks. Apparently, writing down someone's order stopped personal interaction with customers who responded better to people committing their order to memory mkai. The near trick they came up with to remember orders was to parrot everything the customer said back to them, word for word. Not only that, but it was felt that standing by a seated table made it seem that the staff were superior to the customers, so instead we had to squat next to tables, literally squat down to eye level. I tired it once, and the couple I was serving looked so alarmed that I refused to do it again. Story 25, access to the building needs to be more secure, and we have installed electronic locks with badge readers. The doors will require badge access starting Monday. Employees are required to be on site Wednesday for photographs. With a makeup session on Thursday, badges will be issued Friday. Story 26, did tech support and outsource call center. No mobile phones allowed in work. We were doing tech support for a mobile phone company. They gave us all work phones that we were never allowed to use at work. Story 27, the kitchen I worked at had a policy that you clock out 30 minutes after closing. It didn't matter if someone came in 1 minute before closing. We stopped being paid after 30 minutes. Story 28, I had a job where after I had already started, the boss told me I had to cover my tattoos at work. There were people walking around with full sleeves and chest tattoos, but somehow the rules were different for me. I had one where women had to wear hose unless their legs were tan. This one isn't horrible, and I understand the reasoning, but even my doctor thought it was dumb. Only 50 of your sick time can be unscheduled, i.e., calling in and saying you can't make it because you have food poisoning. This means that I had a coworker that had over 700 hours of sick time accrued because she was lucky enough to never get cancer or something where you know in advance that you will be at the doctor all day. Story 29, had a boss tell everyone that if the cash deposit for that day went missing, he would take the money out of our paychecks, even if we weren't there or if it wasn't our fault. It was a bad system to begin with. He also said he would dock our paychecks if things weren't clean to his specifications. I told the managers they couldn't dock our pay for those things as they were illegal. Luckily, they never did, but the management owner was ridiculous in other ways. Telling me I wasn't worth a raise, manager and top salesperson making $11 an hour, telling me I would never get any smarter and that I shouldn't go back to school, and getting my master's in science education next year, and this week finishing my realtor's license. That guy was a... Story 30, I used to work on the only Air Force base in the country that did not have planes. We were a research lab. Regardless, every single person on the base had to take a runway and plane safety course every year. Story 31, 9:30 a.m. HR announced by group email that the company would be reducing their contributions to existing employee pensions. 9:45 a.m. HR announced by group email that they didn't mean what they'd written in the previous email and the reduced pension contributions would only apply to future employees. The second email may have been prompted by a polite email back pointing out the statutory regulations surrounding pension contributions in the UK. Story 32, I worked in mental health facility. There was a manager that tried to make people voluntarily give up their lunch hour to bring their lunch from home and sit in the break room and listen to him lecture about counseling practices. I was the only employee who refused, and I told upper management that I would go to HR if they tried to force me. Of course, I had a target on my back from that point on, but I already had my exit plan ready anyway. Soon after I left, the manager was fired because he did some other things that people complained to both HR and the legal department about. Story 33, because people were taking bathroom breaks to make phone calls, smoke, etc., we were required to provide photographic proof. When we went to the restroom that we excreted, there was a 3 strikes rule for I thought I had to go, but it was just gas. Story 34, in the Navy. So I have a ton. Probably the first one that springs to mind is if you take vacation on Friday and Monday, you're docked 4 days of vacation because they count Saturday and Sunday. Story 35, my employer uses an accruing vacation system. Each paycheck you earn X amount of vacation hours. For people who have been there 10 years, this comes out to approximately a 1 day per month. This is vacation time and needs to be scheduled ahead of time. You also get 5 sick days per year. These are front-loaded every January and can be used on the spot. When you call in sick, you use these hours. At the end of the year, the unused days are lost, so it's on you to use all 5 throughout the year. One year, they decided to switch sick days to also be accruing. The announcement was made in November. This essentially meant that come January, everyone's sick day bank would be 0. After the first paycheck 2 weeks, everyone would have somewhere between 2 to 4 hours of sick time, not enough for a full day. After a second paycheck 1 month, some of the staff might have enough for a full day. We are based in Rochester, New York, 90 minutes from Buffalo. For those who aren't aware, it gets very cold here in the winter. People get sick. We're also a hospital with thousands of employees and hundreds of sick patients. Suffice to say, we went back to front-loading sick days the next year. Story 36. For some reason, Guitar Center made a deal with 5-Hour Energy, and we were supposed to try to get our customers to buy 5-Hour Energies. Absolutely absurd. Story 37. My employer threatened to withhold pay if you didn't sign and I have read and understand the employee handbook sheet in the back of a new handbook they were giving to employees. They put out a memo stating that they would withhold your paychecks until you handed in the signed sheet. In my job at the time, I had an unsupervised position and rarely ever even saw my boss, and I decided I wasn't going to turn in unless they actually said something about it. And even then, I would go into my employee file months later and remove it just for giggles, which they never did. They withheld my paychecks for 3 months. I guess they thought I was some living paycheck-to-paycheck schlub who would be forced to come to them to ask why my pay was being withheld. I kind of enjoyed the little game. I had to dip into my savings near the end of the 3rd month. They then gave in. No one said anything to me about it. I didn't say anything. I had one. After recounting the tale to others, I was told that what they did was illegal. Another thing they tried to do, if you forgot to clock out, they would estimate your hours, which always seemed to be way shorter than your actual hours. Several employees got together and had a lawyer letter sent to management, and the policy was changed so that management actually tried to find out how many hours you worked instead of guesstimating in the employer's favor. Story 38. Ooh, I'm going to win this one. I had an employer mandate that we all put in 50-hour work weeks until our software was complete. Up until this point, it was early in my career, and I was naive. I thought that I was salary, so this just seemed to be part of the job. I also assumed that this meant that I had flexibility in my schedule. So when I needed to go visit a friend in the hospital, I took the afternoon off. I was told that I was out of PTO and that I'd have to have the hours removed from my pay. I asked, well, what about all the overtime I've been putting in? Aren't I salaried? I was told, no, I'm hourly. That craziness ensued, and I ended up calculating all the overtime I'd been forced to work and demanded that they pay me for it. They tried to say that they never authorized the overtime, but I had an email from my manager stating the contrary. They then tried to say that I should let them off the hook because I was still learning their architecture and they shouldn't have to pay me for that. I no longer work for that 2-bit company. Story 39. My company recently rolled out Bit9 program that blocks all unknown executables on all PCs. In theory, it's a great way to protect your PC. The problem is that I'm a developer and I can't even test programs that I built. Our IT refuses to make any exceptions for it. Luckily, I have found a way to bypass Bit9, so at least I can still do my job. Story 40. Not quite what Opie asked, but I quit a job a few weeks ago, and now my old boss is saying that he will not give me my final check until I sign a non-compete form. Story 41. I worked at a fast food fried chicken place for a few years. My boss was generally a great guy, but he had one pet peeve that would cause him to become irrationally angry. The company that owned our store mandated that we have team meetings a few times a year. We would all come in early on a Saturday before we opened, sit around, and listen to our manager update us on new products, complain about our work, blah, blah, blah. These meetings were mandatory, and if we missed one, we could be written up or even fired. And one more thing, we were not to clock in or get paid for these meetings. Our boss, the one I mentioned earlier, would flip his if someone even asked why. His only excuse was, why wouldn't you want to be better at your job? We were mostly teenagers who didn't care enough or single parents who needed the job, so no one wanted to risk getting fired by pointing out that it probably wasn't legal. I was his favorite employee, and he came very close to firing me once when I complained. I heard after I left that someone eventually went to the owners and threatened to sue if this continued, and they promised to give all of their employees compensation for past meetings, but that never happened either. If I knew then what I know now, I would have spoken up more forcefully, gotten fired, and drove straight to a lawyer's office. Story 42. Used to work at McDonald's years ago. One day, it was decided that we would no longer be allowed to use scissors. Like, for anything, from what I could gather, it wasn't my store manager's idea, but came from corporate. But my boss, being the McZombie that he was, immediately started enforcing this boneheaded rule. The only thing that the whole store was allowed to use was this pathetic pair of plastic scissors that wouldn't cut anything. The same kind of tiny plastic scissors that you give a small child so they don't murder themselves. I can't begin to describe how much that rules pissed me off. I was the primary maintenance guy for the store. More or less a janitor, I was trusted to unload hundreds of boxes of food off trucks each week, to repair random things that would break. It was fine and dandy for me to use a power washer that could probably poke a hole through my hand. I was the one that cleaned the vats of 300-degree oil. I drove my own car. I could legally buy guns or even join the army and help blow up the world, but scissors, oh no, that's too dangerous. That place was ridiculous. Story 43, the VP of my division at my previous employer tried to implement a policy where you would instantly fail your performance review if any of your weekly timesheets were late, no matter what cool work you had done. If you developed a universal cure for MS and saved the company $200 on X, Y, and Z, you would still fail if the timesheet was a femtosecond late on a Friday. Central HR told them to off. Instead, it became a company-wide policy, although there were 3 strikes, and you would be marked as improvement required rather than simply failed. Better, but still. Story 44, I worked for a large publishing company writing and editing standardized science tests for different states. When working for Tennessee, we were told not to submit any items referring to cats because, well, they're satanic. I ended up getting banned by the state because of my religious bias defending the scientific validity of the late Permian extinction event. This was 80 years after the Pease trial. The whole process of designing norm-reference standardized science tests was a sad grind and Kafkaesque nightmare. Parents, teachers, bureaucrats, fellow editors, all of them seemed completely illiterate of basic science. Story 45, not so much an official policy, but a comment about how we should approach tasks. You need to be more of a team player and figure out the solution by yourself. What? Story 46, I had a majestic handlebar mustache. Curled perfectly, waxed it all the time. It was great. A few other male employees, including the assistant GM, had a full beard. I was the only one with just a mustache. GM comes in and proclaims that we may only have a beard or nothing. I went to talk to him because surely my mustache was okay. Nope, I was lucky the assistant GM had a beard, or that would be at the table too. He said if we didn't have a beard or just the stubble look, would have to take time off ID work to grow one since stubble didn't look good. I pleaded with him to let me keep it. It had taken me a solid 4 years to get it where it was no deal. Told me if I came in after the cutoff day with it, I'd be fired. I made stickers and posters with Save a Statch and posted them all over. Told our regular customers to talk to him. No dice. Ended up shaving off, of course, did the Hitler statch while doing it. Not 2 weeks later, word comes down from corporate he's not allowed to make such rules, and it's been reversed, stated growing it again. TLDR Jim tries to show he's in charge by making me shave. Did he want supposed to make up his own rules? Sick days count as personal time off, aka it's taken out of your vacation time. Personal time off may not be taken without 2 weeks advance notice in writing and approval from your manager, or you'll have a written warning placed in your file. So, you're not allowed to get sick without scheduling it 2 weeks in advance and getting your manager's written approval to do so. It's a health insurance company. Story 47, one employee named Zach was told that he and he alone was not allowed to do a 2 in the company bathroom. I was actually standing there to hear this come out of the owner's mouth. Story 48, I worked for Parks and Rec. They had a skating rink, roller not ice, and ended up hiring someone who did not know how to roller skate. Of course, this person decides to try skating on their first shift and falls down. After that, no employees at the skating rink were allowed to wear skates. It certainly made things like leading skating games or activities a bit interesting. Story 49, when I was working at a company abroad, my company changed the sick day policy from 10 days per year to 1 day per month. Naturally, this made everyone take a 3-day weekend once a month to use their sick day before they lost it. Story 50, I work in a warehouse for a major cosmetics company. We were told that if a cologne or perfume broke and got on your hands, you'd be fired for stealing if you didn't immediately wash it off. Story 51 had 4 consecutive bosses come into the section I worked in and order everyone to come in 15 minutes early. Even though we already did, our shift was from 0700 to 1500 and everyone got in at 0645. Getting in 15 minutes early at 0645 became 15 minutes early at 0630, then 0615, and finally 0600. Then some inbred looks up the regulation that says if we're made to work a 9-hour shift, we have to be given an hour lunch. So now our official shift is 0600 to 1500 with an hour lunch. And we all have to be in at 0545. Goofy like this is why I got out of the military. Story 52, no drinking water on the floor and no water at your cash registers. We were allowed to go get a drink from the fountain, but if a cashier had a lineup, they couldn't. If floor associates took too long getting a drink, we could get written up. I brought my water anyway. Also, if they found water bottles anywhere, they'd throw them out. I caught a manager trying to throw my water bottle out, and I snatched it back from them, telling them they had absolutely no right to throw out my property. Story 53, there's so many depressing ones in here. I'm going to offer a lighter tone one. I was in charge of an IT call center of about 15 employees. If someone came a bit late, no sweat, but I told them I didn't want to hear any boring excuses. I forgot to set my alarm, I overslept, etc. The excuse they used didn't have to be true. It just had to be interesting. No employee ever complained about my policy. Story 54, in my old job, my boss was concerned employees were going to the bathroom to just sit on the toilet for a few minutes and play on their phone. He seriously tried to enact a rule that if you go to the bathroom, you have to take a picture of your ander and show it to him to prove you were going to the bathroom to do your business. Someone obviously complained about the complete invasion of privacy, and he got replaced. Turned out he has a pee-in fetish and wanted the new rule to get his kicks. Story 55, since our office is really productive while listening to music since some of the work is repetitive, especially doing legal paperwork, my CEO decided to ban music and headphones since he can't see how music could be productive. Since then, our numbers dropped and get pissed and confused on why. It's still banned, and it's been months. The CEO's daughter gets them because of reasons. She just left because the server went down for 5 minutes and thought it wouldn't come back on. Story 56, I worked for a low-end restaurant chain. It's fast food. Essentially, the old boss fired not for this reason, tried to enforce a hand-washing policy. But when we read it through, his strange wording implied that we should wash our hands after every occurrence handling food. And thoroughly, I did the math. At about 2,000 orders a day, we'd waste 8 hours daily per person if we washed our hands for 15 seconds. That'd waste over 1,100 gallons of water daily washing our hands. Story 57, set work hours. They used to be flexible, like come in 2 hours early and leave 2 hours early, as long as you got your 8 hours. There were some folks who would come in early to beat rush hour. And it worked well, because they were on hand to address issues as the customers began firing up their computer systems. Then there are people who abuse this and would come in late and leave on time, assuming that they weren't actually being monitored. Instead of addressing those people directly, they instituted a blanket policy that everyone has to work 8 to 5. Leading to decreased customer satisfaction and employees grumbling because they spent more time sitting in traffic. Story 58, the ESL school I work at doesn't have enough money to get ink for the printers, but my boss wanted to install cameras in every classroom. According to him, it was required by my country's educational authority, despite it not having jurisdiction over private institutes. Thankfully, he's selling the school back to the original owners. Story 59, when I was a supervisor at a call center for streaming services, our stay-at-home mom of a project manager, she worked from home several states away. Not kidding, tried to enact employee rules that included making it mandatory for all of our agents to arrive at their desks 15 minutes before their shift. She wanted them to spend that time doing any updates on their computers and reading any knowledge-based changes that went into effect while they were gone. Unpaid, I brought these to the operations manager and told him I refused to let the employees sign these until that policy was removed. I was doing the company a favor, since it would result in a major class action lawsuit. The project manager tried to go around me and sent it via an internal systems message, and I had to go to every agent and tell them to ignore it. She left not long after when the client called her out on a conference call for her other terrible ideas and stated they wouldn't re-sign with our company next year if she was still involved. Edit just remembered another with her. When I first started, we were clumsily taught how to do this weird report that had to be done every single day that took a sample of our calls and customer interactions and showed then to the client, supposedly to track trends. The client could see every interaction we did already and easily see trends themselves. After about a year and a half, the new community manager, who was the one who said they would not re-sign with her involved, called me personally and asked what this report was and why they got it every day. Turns out no one from the client knew and just ignored it. After some digging, I learned a mess. Project manager made it up way back when some outage happened that she was slow to report on. To make it seem like we were being proactive, that report took 2 people a couple hours every day just because she had a knee panic reaction. We were so glad when the community manager told us to stop wasting time on it. Story 60, we're not trusted to have a key to the clothes room to get replacement gloves, but we have unlimited and unsupervised access to a truck that costs more than a small house along with unlimited diesel. Story 61, as my username might suggest, I'm a welder. I work in a large factory, and we recently got a new building manager. And within a week, there was a new policy direct from him stating that wearing hats during work is no longer allowed because it doesn't present a professional image. Now I can see how this could be reasonable in certain lines of work, such as a waiter at a nice restaurant, retail salesman, etc. I, however, am a welder who works in a factory. Who exactly am I supposed to be concerned about looking professional to? We don't have customers walking in and out of the building. To make things even more ridiculous, all the welders wear these flame-resistant head covers similar to what you might have seen on a fireman or race car driver. The welding we do is very physical work in a hot building with hot metal, so you tend to work up a sweat. This means all the welders are now walking around with wet, matted, and completely disheveled hair, which is apparently more professional looking than a hat.